I sued my daughter while I dying of cancer, but nobody asked why stay with me till the very end and let me know where you're watching from so I can see how far the truth really spreads. I never thought I would spend the last years of my life sitting across from my own daughter in a courtroom. But there I was, wearing a scarf to cover my thinning hair, breathing through pain I tried to hide. And still, the only thing people could see was the lawsuit, not the cancer, not the loneliness, not the years that led me there, just a mother suing her daughter. The courtroom was cold that morning. Not the kind of cold you feel on your skin, but the kind that settles in your bones when no one's on your side. Emily sat on the other side of the room. She didn't look at me. She didn't wave. Not even a glance. Just kept her eyes on the judge like I was a stranger who meant nothing. Maybe in her eyes, that's what I had become. The reporters were there, of course. Some young woman with bright red lipstick snapped my photo as I was walking in. I saw the headline later. 70-year-old mother sues daughter for abandonment. The word they used was abandonment. Another said I was heartless, that I was cruel. One even called me a disgrace to motherhood. Not a single one asked me why. I heard people whisper outside the court. One woman shook her head and said I should be ashamed. Another man muttered that parents today want everything handed to them. They didn't know I raised 2 kids on a janitor's salary. They didn't know I went through chemotherapy alone because no one would take time off. They didn't know Jason, my son, promised to help but disappeared the moment I signed the house over to him. They only saw the lawsuit. And maybe they were right. Maybe I crossed a line. Maybe I hurt Emily more than I realized. But what would you do if the only person left who could help you didn't even answer your calls? What would you do if your body was failing and you had no money, no strength, and no family left willing to show up? I looked at her during the trial. Just once. I hoped she'd look back. Even just for a second. I hoped to see something in her eyes. Hurt. Regret. A memory. But all I saw was distance. She looked right through me. And in that moment, I wasn't her mother. I was just an old woman sitting on the other side of the law. They asked me why I was suing her. I said it was because I was sick, because I had bills, because she was my daughter and daughters take care of their mothers. But deep down, that wasn't the full truth. I sued her because I didn't know how else to ask for help. I sued her because it was the only way left to get her to look at me, to hear me, to acknowledge that I was still alive. I don't expect you to understand. I don't even expect forgiveness. But I need to tell you this story. Not to justify what I did, but to ask the question no one has ever asked me. Not once. Not even in that courtroom. Why did I do it? I always thought I was a fair mother. Maybe a little strict. Maybe a little tired. But never unfair. I had 2 children, Emily and Jason. And I told myself every single day that I loved them both the same. Emily came first. She was loud, curious, and never afraid to ask why. Her questions could fill a room. Her silence when it came was rare. I used to say she was born with her fists clenched and her eyes wide open, ready to challenge the world. And me. Then came Jason. Quiet as a breeze. Sweet as sugar. He clung to my side like a shadow, always needing, always grateful. He made me feel needed. He made me feel soft. And maybe that's what I started to chase without knowing. Emily, she never begged for love. She worked for it. She brought home straight A's. She cleaned up after Jason. She offered to help when I was bone tired from a double shift. And I'd nod, thank her, and move on. I didn't mean to take her for granted, but I did. There was one day I still dream about. Emily was around 10. She stood in the kitchen, her cheeks flushed with excitement, asking if she could take piano lessons. There was this sparkle in her eyes I hadn't seen in a while. I remember saying no. Too expensive, I told her. We didn't have room for luxury. She nodded. Quiet. Too quiet. 2 months later, I bought Jason a brand new laptop for school. His broke and he said he needed it. I didn't even think twice. But Emily did. She walked into my room and asked, not angrily, just softly, am I not worth as much as a computer? I remember snapping. Told her not to compare. Told her she was being ungrateful. She didn't speak back. She just walked away. That moment should have stayed with me. But I buried it. Like all the other little things she swallowed in silence. And over time, that silence grew. She stopped asking. She stopped telling me what she wanted. I thought she was becoming distant, cold. But now I know she was protecting herself from me. Jason remained my sweet boy. He failed classes, and I forgave him. He missed curfews, and I made excuses. He hugged me, and I melted. I told myself he needed me more. That Emily was strong. That she'd be fine. But I wasn't raising them equally. I was raising Jason to need me and Emily to prove herself. One got nurtured. The other got tested. Now, when I think of Emily's face the last time I saw her, I see not anger, but exhaustion. A girl who spent her whole life knocking on a door I never opened. And I was on the other side, convinced I was being fair. After my husband passed, I was left with a quiet house and too many decisions. The silence after death is loud in strange ways. I didn't know what to do with the life we had built. So I started with the obvious. Who would take care of things when I was gone? Jason was still here. He lived just 10 minutes away. He stopped by once a week with groceries, asked how I was, told me he was busy. I told myself that was enough. That he was dependable. Emily by then lived far away. Married. Working. Doing well. I assumed she didn't need me. Or anything I had left to give. So I made the call. The lawyer came. We moved the deed to Jason's name. The house, the savings, everything. It felt like I was securing the future. His future. Our family's legacy. I didn't tell Emily. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I didn't think she'd care. We hadn't spoken properly in months. Maybe years. And part of me believed she'd just roll her eyes, call it typical, and move on. Because deep down, I knew what I had done before. I remembered the piano, the look on her face. That quiet question, am I not worth as much as a computer? I remember choosing silence over apology. And now I was choosing Jason. Again, not out of favoritism, I told myself, but out of logic. He was the one who showed up. Emily had her own life, her own resources, her own path. She didn't need this house. Or me. I thought sons were supposed to take care of their mothers. That's what I was taught. That's what I saw around me. I never questioned it. I followed tradition, even when that tradition had already hurt my daughter once before. Jason told me it was the right thing to do, that I shouldn't worry, that he'd always be there. I believed him because I needed to, because the alternative that I might be wrong again was too heavy to carry. But the truth is, I didn't ask Emily. I didn't even think to. And that was the mistake. Not the papers, not the money, the silence. The assumption that she wouldn't care, that she didn't deserve to be part of the decision, that was what broke everything. I thought I was doing the right thing. But all I was doing was repeating history. And this time, the cost would be more than just a broken dream. The doctor told me it was cancer. Stage 3. Operable, but aggressive. I sat there with the paper in my hand, staring at words I couldn't pronounce, wondering how long I had before everything unraveled. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just felt small, smaller than I had ever felt in my life. I went home and boiled water for tea. That was the first thing I did. I didn't call anyone. I didn't scream. I just stood in the kitchen, watching steam rise, like it could carry away the fear pressing on my chest. I thought someone will come. Someone will show up. I just needed to wait. Jason didn't answer my calls that day. He texted later, said he was busy with work, promised to stop by on the weekend. He didn't. The weekend came and went. So did the next. Every time I asked, he had something else. A deadline. A trip. A bad cold. His voice sounded distant, like he was already halfway gone. I didn't want to bother Emily. She was far away. I hadn't told her about the inheritance. We hadn't spoken in a while. Not since that last Christmas. But after a few days, I sent her a message. Just 3 sentences. I told her I was sick, that I missed her, that I hoped she'd call. She never did. The days passed quietly. Too quietly. The house felt heavier. My joints ached more than usual. I started forgetting things. One day, I boiled the same pot of water 3 times and still never made the tea. I kept thinking, this is when family steps in. This is when the ones you raised show up. I waited and waited, and nothing. At first, I told myself they were busy. Then I told myself they'd come around. Then I stopped telling myself anything. I just sat in the dark living room, watching the hallway, hoping to hear the sound of a key in the door. What hurt most wasn't the cancer. It was knowing that even with everything I'd given, I was still alone. I had given Jason my trust, my home, my savings. I had given Emily my years, my effort, my sleepless nights. And now I couldn't even get a phone call. The anger didn't come all at once. It crept in. Slow. Quiet. It started as a question. Then it grew into a weight. Why did no one care? Why was I the one left behind? Why did my children, both of them, vanish when I needed them most one morning? I looked at my reflection and didn't recognize the woman staring back. My face had thinned. My hair had started to fall. My eyes looked empty. That's when I made the decision. Not out of spite. Not out of revenge. But out of desperation. If no one would come on their own, then I would make them come. I would remind them through the law, if I had to, that I was still their mother, that I was still here, that I still mattered. The courtroom smelled like old wood and fear. I sat in the front row, hands folded in my lap, trying to hold myself together while everything around me felt like it was breaking. Reporters lined the back wall. Their cameras clicked like little knives carving out my image. I heard whispers before the hearing even started. Some called me selfish. Others used the word cruel. One woman near the door shook her head and said I was everything wrong with parents these days. Emily walked in 10 minutes late. Her steps were calm, her back straight. She didn't look at me. Not once. She sat on the opposite bench, opened a folder, and waited. As if she were just another professional, not my daughter. My chest tightened the way it does when you know something's broken and you can't fix it anymore. The judge came in and called my name. My voice cracked when I stood. I tried to speak clearly, but I could feel my cheeks burning. My words came out dry, almost rehearsed like they didn't even belong to me. I talked about the illness, the hospital bills, the law that said children had to care for their elderly parents. But nobody looked at me with kindness. Not even curiosity. Just judgment. I kept looking at Emily, wishing for her eyes, wishing for a flinch. Something. But she stared forward, expression flat face unreadable. I wanted to believe she was just protecting herself, but it felt like I didn't exist to her anymore. Like I was some stranger asking for too much. Every time someone mentioned my name, it felt heavier. like each syllable was dragging me deeper under. The trial went on for hours, but I don't remember most of it. I just remember silence. The kind that wraps around your throat and doesn't let go. When the judge spoke, the room seemed to shrink. His voice was steady, but each word felt like it was being carved into stone. He said the documents were clear, that I had transferred the deed to Jason, that the financial accounts, the savings, the home, all of it was legally his now. My mouth went dry. He went on to say that Emily did have a legal responsibility to support me. A small portion. But because Jason held the majority of the estate, the primary duty fell to him. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just stared at the floor like it might swallow me whole. I could feel the silence from the other bench. I didn't have to look to know Emily had heard every word. I wondered if she had been waiting for this. If she came to court not to defend herself, but just to be heard. For the truth to finally come out. I had handed everything to one child and then expected the other to still act like I was hers to protect. I thought I could make up for imbalance with obligation. But obligation without love is just resentment waiting to bloom. I remembered the day I signed those papers. Jason hugged me, told me he'd take care of everything. I believed him. Maybe because I wanted to. Maybe because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't. But now he was gone. And all I had left was a courtroom and a daughter I barely recognized. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat there and let it settle in the simple, brutal truth. I had created this. All of it. She waited until the crowd had thinned. Everyone was gone except a janitor and a sleepy security guard. I was still sitting on the wooden bench, clutching my purse like it might anchor me to something real. Then I heard her footsteps. Calm. Steady. Familiar in a way that made my breath catch. Emily stood in front of me. Not angry. Not cold. Just tired. Her face looked older than I remembered. Her shoulders lower, like she'd been carrying something for too long. She didn't sit down. She didn't hug me. She just looked at me, and for a second, I was taken back to the day she left for college. The same eyes. The same quiet. I opened my mouth. I wanted to say I was sorry. That I was wrong. That I had loved her. That I had simply failed to show it. But the words didn't come. They sat in my throat like stones too heavy to lift. We stood there in silence. It wasn't angry silence. It was sad, resigned, like both of us knew this conversation was years too late. I reached out, not to grab her, just a small motion, an instinct. Her eyes dropped to my hand, then back to mine. She said one thing. Her voice didn't shake. It wasn't cruel. It was soft, gentle, and final. She said, "I forgive you, but I can't be your daughter again." Then she turned and walked away. I didn't call after her. I didn't cry. I just sat there listening to the sound of her footsteps fade down the hallway. That was the last time I saw her. And I knew in that moment that I hadn't just lost a case. I had lost my place in her life. Forever. At first I told myself he was just busy, that maybe the court notice had shaken him, that once it all calmed down, he would come. A call. A visit. Something. But the days passed. Then weeks. I sent messages that showed as read, but got no reply. I left voicemails that went unheard. He had changed his number 2 months later. I found out by accident when I tried to call and the voice on the line wasn't his. I didn't try again. I just sat with the phone in my lap for a long time. Then I turned it off. He never showed up at the hospital. Not once. He didn't come to check if I had food, if I was breathing, if I was even still alive. The silence he left behind didn't roar. It just settled. Heavy. Familiar. Final. I thought about all the times I chose him. Back when Emily asked for things and I said no. When I defended him, covered for him, handed him everything I had. I had loved him so loudly, so completely. I didn't see him walk away until he was already gone. And that was it. No grand betrayal. No dramatic goodbye. Just absence, sense. Just nothing. That kind of emptiness doesn't shout. It whispers. And it never stops. It was a quiet afternoon when I sat down at the kitchen table with a pen and a blank sheet of paper. The light from the window hit the wood just right, warm and soft. I stared at the page for a while before I started writing. There was no rush, no bitterness left. I crossed Jason's name out of the old will, not out of anger, just out of understanding. He had already taken everything he needed from me. My money, my trust, my silence. There was nothing more I could give him. Then I picked up another piece of paper and wrote Emily's name. Not in a legal document, just a letter. A small, folded note I tucked into the back of the drawer where I knew someone would find it someday. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't ask her to come back. I just wanted her to know one thing. That in the end, it was her who came. Even for a moment. Even without love. She came back when I had nothing left to give. And that meant more than anything she could ever say. That was all I had. A letter. A name. A quiet truth. She's always 10 years old in my dreams. Hair messy. Feet bare. A tiny figure running across the grass, calling out for me with a crumpled piece of paper in her hand. Purple and blue scribbles fill the page. It doesn't look like much, but to her, it's everything. Do you think it's pretty, Mom? That's what she always asked. In the dream, I always say yes. I smile. I nod. I reach out. And for a while, that's all the dream is. Soft. Safe. Forgiving. But last night, it changed. She ran toward me again. Same hair. Same drawing. Same wide eyes. But before I could answer, before I could tell her yes, she stopped. She looked at me long and quiet. Not with anger, but with something deeper. A kind of knowing that made my chest tighten. I opened my arms just like always. I said her name. Gently. Desperate. But this time she didn't come closer. She turned. And she walked away. I called after her. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. My voice cracked in my throat. I screamed her name, but the dream swallowed the sound whole. Then I woke up. Room dark. Pillow damp. Arms still outstretched. And that silence, it wasn't just in the room. It was in me. If you still have your parents, or your children, or even just one person who once made you feel safe, hold them close. Not everyone gets a second chance. Not everyone hears the words they needed before it's too late. Sometimes love doesn't die. It just goes quiet. And when you finally notice the silence, it's already turned into distance. I don't say this out of regret anymore. I've lived with regret long enough to know it can't bring people back. But it can teach. And maybe my story can be someone else's reminder. That pain doesn't come only from the things we say. It comes from the things we never say. The hugs we don't give. The calls we put off. The moments we assume we'll always have. So, if you still have a chance, hug them. Call them. Sit beside them in silence if words are too hard. But don't wait. Don't do what I did. Don't wait until you're sitting alone with an empty hallway and a closed door. I'm not waiting anymore. I've let go of expectation. I've written what needed to be written. And I'm okay if this story ends here. But today, as I sat by the window finishing these last few words, pen in hand. Light fading into the room. Someone knocked on the door. If this story spoke to you, you're not alone. So many of us carry silent scars from those we once trusted most. But healing begins the moment we choose ourselves. If you've ever faced betrayal, I see you. Share this story if it made you feel something. Someone else might need it too.